So today I just wanted to take a quick look at Cat People, the 1982 erotic thriller, which, honestly, the only reason it was given the title erotic thriller is because it obviously features a lot more nudity than gore, but there's still a decent amount of gore going on. Definitely a very well-written film, extremely well acted. I just love this film altogether. It's also just a very I guess you could say somewhat of a unique spin on the whole werewolf, lycanthrope, or in this case, werecat mythology. So basically, if you're not familiar with the film, what the whole ideology behind this one was is that you had a village of people centuries ago, of course, that would sacrifice their children to the cats, believing them gods. And then, of course, the spirit of the child was believed to grow inside of the cat until the cat itself became human. So I guess you could say, in a sense, that the two souls united, becoming just one interchangeable being between human and cat and human. So I thought that was just definitely very unique and interesting. But this has always been one of my favorite films. I absolutely love this one, and of course, how could you not love Natasha Kenzie? So, you know, she's definitely a very gorgeous woman. So, of course, this film itself was directed by Paul Schrader, who himself was not a stranger to directing as well as screenplay writing. Some of the screenplays that he's written, of course, were for Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Last Temptation of Christ, and Bringing Out the Dead. So he himself has also had a fair amount of work. Granted, this was not his first feature-length film, but directing-wise, this is definitely my favorite of his, so it's pretty much the only one I care to talk about as far as examples of his work. Obviously, the film itself was distributed by Universal Pictures, and this was a period in the 80s when they were going through and remaking several of their films. The thing here is that I don't think it's fair to compare this film to the original Cat People because they are extremely different. The only two things that they actually have in common is the swimming pool scene where Irene, or Irina, is pursuing Oliver's other love interest. So that's pretty much the only scene that these two films actually have in common. Otherwise, they're basically two very different movies. So the character of Irene, or Irina, pretty much was an orphan. She grew up away from her brother Paul, and as an adult has flown out to New Orleans to meet him. And obviously she doesn't know too much about her background. He kind of keeps it a secret for a while, and then eventually, you know, throughout the progression of the film, she does discover who and what she is. But of course, just the shocking discovery that Paul is interested in taking up with her as mates. This is obviously just very shocking, and I guess you could say to a degree just extremely gross. But the character of Paul, who is played by Malcolm McDowell, this is definitely not the first time he has played a character who dabbled in the taboo issue of incest. Of course, if you're familiar with his role as Caligula, there was definitely a bit of incest dabbling in that film as well. But Malcolm McDowell himself is definitely one of those unique actors. He's not afraid to take risks, and he'll definitely go the full, you know, 9-10 yards for a role, which in my opinion just makes a very awesome and interesting and unique actor. But essentially what I would say is that this is more of a story of sexual awakening, I guess you could say, Irene's sexual awakening, where we basically realize, or she kind of hints at, that she's been uncomfortable in her own skin her entire life. She feels that she stands out, not necessarily because she was an orphan, but she feels she was different. She feels more connected to nature and the world around her. And definitely just the way she approaches things is very much different from, say, people during that time period would have felt. I also especially love the music that was used in the film. The score itself was written by Giorgio Moroder, which I think is just very fantastic. Most people who have seen this film are also, in my opinion, the majority of the people that I've run across have been very big fans of the film score itself. And then, of course, you have the title song, For Cat People, which was a collaboration between David Bowie and Mr. Marauder, which is also a very fantastic film. If you've ever seen the movie Inglourious Basterds, that same theme song was later played during the ending sequence when the film theater is about to be set afire or bombed, I guess you could say. But yes, that was also a very good use of that film, but extremely, extremely excellent music in my opinion. I do have a few, not necessarily complaints, but suggestions that I would have made as far as changes for the film. You know, just kind of some scenes that I felt were unnecessary. Just say, for example, there's a scene in the film where Irene is sightseeing because her brother Paul has stepped out. No one really knows where he is. So we travel along with her and we see the sights of New Orleans with her. The following day, when she's in a taxi, she goes to a zoo, and the taxi driver tries to take her to the French Quarter. She references that she's already been there, she's already seen it. So in my opinion, we really didn't have to go sightseeing with her because they've already referenced she's seen it, she's been there. In my opinion, I just felt it was an unnecessary scene. You know, I just kind of felt it was a bit tedious, which I know is just kind of a weird suggestion on my part. But there were a few scenes in the film which I kind of felt were a little bit maybe not necessarily needed, kind of like the one scene where Irene goes off with Oliver. They're staring out at his cabin and they're crab fishing. This whole scene of showing them bonding and showing that they care and like each other really isn't necessary because that's already understood just by the previous date scene earlier in the film. I don't know, for some reason those are just two scenes in the film that I just feel oddly nitpicky about. I really don't know why, but, excuse me, I really don't know why, but for some reason I kind of feel like they could have been handled differently. Granted, these are my opinions. And then just oddly, there's another scene where I'm just really not too sure if it's more of a plot hole type scenario. There's the one scene where Irene was running away from Paul's house. She stops a patrol car and we discover that they were the ones that were housing the leopard as well as various bodies buried in the basement. What I find odd is that how on earth could they have entered that home without a search warrant, and just the fact that the dog went nuts and started barking, does that really give or provide enough probable cause in order for them to enter and investigate that home? I don't know, that's just kind of something that's just always made me curious, like, why did this happen? I know its purpose is to move the story along, but it just seems really odd to me just the way that one scene was handled. Some of the things that I had found interesting about this film, as I had said, was they did use cougars for this film rather than leopards. They just dyed them black because apparently it's easier to train a mountain lion than it is an actual black leopard. Also, actor John Hurd had originally turned down the film because he believed it to be a pornographic film. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially because it's definitely not a sex-driven film, but it can definitely go that way. Another thing that I caught my interest was apparently they had originally considered actress Bo Derek as for the role of Irene, and I'm honestly glad they did go with Natasha Kenzie. I think she was a better character type, but yes, I know a lot of it has to do with the fact that I've just grown so accustomed to seeing her face in this film, but I don't know, I just think it would have been kind of a weird choice. I don't think the movie would have flowed the same had it been a different actress. And it was also during the genealogy scene where Paul is letting Irene know about the, I guess, the history of the were people, or the were cat. Originally, Natasha Kinsky's mother had played a part in that film. She was a leopard with a woman head, so obviously she just wore a cat costume, and she was sitting in a tree. I think originally that was cut out because it was felt that the scene was a little bit too hokey and they just went with actual cats. But I definitely found that interesting. But yes, definitely one of my favorite films, one of the more unique films, and just an overall awesome and great story. But that is pretty much all I have for you guys on Cat People for today, and I will talk to you later.